Is that
Okay.
recording?
Yes, we should be recording now. So, um,
Oh, I see the delay again.
yes, we'll have to work around that as a problem, I guess. We'll
Okay,
see.
sure.
Um, it's usually not that big of a deal if we have a delay in the whole system, but we'll work on it from there. Okay, so I let's just get started, and people will join in a couple minutes. And like I said, we're recording this, and we're going to put it on the global website for Startup Grind here in a couple days. Take me a little time to get that set up. So welcome to our event today. This is part of Startup Grind's Female Founders or Startup Grind Women's Month, and so we're highlighting female founders and women entrepreneurs this month. It's my great pleasure to introduce a very old friend of mine that I've worked with in a couple of different capacities over the years, Miss Sara Stewart. And she's going to be talking a little bit today about her entrepreneurial or really life journey. And, going from, I guess, years ago when I knew you as a student at a community college, and your whole journey there from starting at a community college system in biotech and then moving from that point through your career path. So I guess to get started with everybody, could you first start off and tell us a little bit about your career path in general, Sara?
Sure. So, I've always been interested in marine biology and started out at a community college in Alabama because it was cheap and because I could not afford the University of Alabama when I lived there at the time. Um, then I realized I couldn't do too much with fish unless I went to Auburn, and that was taboo. So I ended up moving down to Mobile, and external circumstances kind of destroyed that adventure. So then I ended up moving to New Orleans, and I found out all of those credits did not transfer easily. So I had to kind of start over, if you will. And I started at a community college down the street in New Orleans, and that's where I met you. I spent 2 years there. Ended up graduating from the University of New Orleans with a Bachelor's of Science in Earth and Environmental and Coastal Science. Um, I worked for the state of Louisiana and did some odd jobs. And my current boss, he came in the middle of job hopping. He came to this bar that I was managing at and told me, "Listen, kid, I like you. You just need to be patient. Wait for me to get this grant. I'm hiring you." And then he hired me within the year, and then he slowly coaxed and bribed me to move to Texas with the promise that if there was ever an opportunity for me to pursue graduate school, he would absolutely go out of his way to make it happen. And here it is a couple years later. I'm now at Texas A&M University getting my master's in science in rangeland wildlife and fisheries management, which is a complete mouthful.
That is a lot, and you're also involved in a lot of other activities for this position, if I'm right. That you've got like a really big um, I would call it a sabbatical that you're looking at going to, right?
Sabbatical?
Um, that you're looking at doing a trip.
Oh,
For,
yeah. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So during my lull of moving to Texas, College Station, and realizing it is not New Orleans, so I need to adapt and find something to do with my time. I, adopted a dog and did all of these things to preoccupy myself to not be bored. And I, and I had applied 2 years in a row to this program online. It's called Homeward Bound. It's this Women in STEM leadership or STEAM leadership initiative. And the first year I was not accepted, but the second year I was. And you have to go through this whole application and video process. And by the second round, I just cussed at them and made some jokes. And then that's when they accepted me. I was like, okay, I think we're going to get along. So, yeah, so it was an online program where we go through leadership skills and essentially breaking down how I perceive leadership, how I perceive myself. There was this whole LSI coaching where I had, I want to say, 8 other people anonymously give me feedback of how they felt about me and my different, in the different areas that you work. Am I competitive? Am I confrontational? Am I too nice? Am I a go-getter? Am I, just all of these different personality aspects in it. And that was really eye-opening. And the entire process was very, very, very good. At first I thought it was a little hokey and cheesy, but by the end I was like, no, that was a good experience. And it actually just wrapped up. And so the second half of this program is my year's cohort, because they're doing 10 years of this, of 100 women each year. My year's cohort culminates in Antarctica with an expedition from South America to Antarctica, and we get, full-on professional lessons on the vessel every day. We get excursions, and it's basically taking you to one of the least damaged places on Earth and saying, this is what you're fighting for. Do you see this? This is why we're here. You're in STEM, you're in science, you love, I don't know, animals. Insert your passion, So I think it's going to be great.
Really, yeah. So I can tell you that number one, there's too little of leadership development in the sciences in general.
I agree.
That it's always been a problem that I've seen, and so that's really, I think this thing did all of that for you, because I think that's a really critical point to the direction that you're taking, because you're going to be pushed one way or the other into leadership positions. Whether I mean, that's kind of your goals there, is the directions you're taking. And a lot of times I've seen just people, myself included, just completely unprepared to walk into those positions, and it's like I said, it's just a very important skill set. So when is the trip to Antarctica?
December of 2024, and there's a whole fundraising initiative on my end that will be in the background for that one.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'll see how we can link some of that information into this. I'm not 100% sure where to put it or anything, but work on that.
Oh, that'd be lovely. Thank you. No, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Sure. It's one of these things that I'm hoping that 10, 15 years from now, I get to interview you again and hear about all of your success stories from this point going on.
That'd be fun.
I think I told you this years ago when you were at the community college. I still keep in touch with my mentors from when I was a undergraduate. They still give me advice. Some of it's really good advice, some of it's not so good. But I still, use them as sounding. And I think, that's one of the things that I've been, so happy to watch, your progress in so many different areas. Really incredible to see those kind of things taking shape, So,
thank you. And it's been nice to have somebody to pick all of this back to. Hey, what do you think about this, real adult?
I don't know. Well, so, one of the things that we've talked about probably over the past 2 to 3 years was your foray and moving into the entrepreneurial side of things. And I really do love the idea that you've kept an open mind there, because a lot of times in academia, they want you to go into academia, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's no room. My old PI, basically told me, look, I train research scientists, not people, that go into private industry.
Right.
And so, your journey, with one foot basically in the academic side and another foot, in the entrepreneurial side is a really interesting balancing act there. And I'm sure sometimes it feels like you're on a razor's edge with it, but so can you tell us a little bit about where did that pathway start, and where is it going right now, and just get us started on that.
Sure. Excuse me, I keep coughing. It's been allergies is terrible. Well, you know, in the United States, it seems like it's always a right to work state. And you can give and give and give, but if somebody has some reason or another, they can just boot you out. And it's happened to me once or twice before for absolutely no legitimate reason. And they didn't need a reason. And I was not in a position to fight it other than be polite and go on my way. And I've had those bosses come back to me later and say, I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted. It was higher up the chain. It was just, anyway. So getting the position that I'm in now, which I love, my boss is getting older and I'm watching the dynamic shift. And it's just, there's no reason to get rid of anybody, but I'm also, I think I need something a little bit more stable, something in my back pocket, not to screw anybody over, not to override the validity of my role within this company, but just as something to secure me. I'm like, well, what do I like to do? Well, I've been in the fisheries industry for almost 10 years. And with this master's degree program, I met a bunch of people along the Texas coast, just as I had along Louisiana. I met the fishermen and the oyster guys and shrimpermen and all that. And then there was this Sea Grant oyster aquaculture workshop in Galveston, and it was free. And actually, if you attended, you could have gotten paid for it. But I was like, I don't need to get paid. I was interested in seaweed in the Gulf, which seems like a joke, but I don't think it's intangible. I think it's just, it needs a little more push because we're not in colder, deeper water. So I went there with my mindset on how do I incorporate this aquaculture concept into seaweed and not necessarily oysters. And then I was presented with a brand new industry in Texas. The oyster aquaculture industry was just passed in 2019, whereas it's been a thing across the Gulf for many years. And so I'm sitting here with almost 10 years in the fisheries, not stupid to what I'm being told. I'm like, well, okay, I could entertain some oysters. And I met some very intelligent people. I started going to workshops and conferences, and it just slowly evolved. And I researched and I studied and I went out. I saw a couple of farms, and it would have almost been stupid of me not to take advantage of this opportunity, considering how much experience I have in the fisheries. I've been basically handed, here's a brand new industry. Do you want to get on top of it or not? Put in the work and the time and learn some oysters. Leave the shrimp alone for just a minute when you could be goofing off at a bar, So here I am.
So there's two things that really hit home with me that you said just now, and the first is that keeping a side project of something you're interested in. Almost every entrepreneur that I've run across started that way.
Yeah, I've heard you've taught me this as well. You have beaten it into the back of my head, but it's
something that I learned really late in life, and I think that I would have, instead of jumping on what were bad opportunities in some ways, because you take what you can get.
Sure.
If I would have had those other things going on in the background, I probably would have said, you know what, I don't need this. It isn't a good career choice. Let me, let me walk away from this.
Mhm.
And you all can, obviously you don't really need me or want me. You're just,
Or
getting
whatever the circumstances were.
right.
Right, right.
And so I'd always say that you should have something like that going on in the background. It
I
might
agree.
be your full time, and you might not ever want to take it as a full time, position, but you always have something else to fall back on to where if things go, that you can say, hey, I don't need this.
It's a
Um,
safety net. And this is
something that,
especially something that you're interested in. It turns into a hobby that's making you a few bucks,
yeah,
and it's not painful, and it's not, I don't know, insert whatever you could make quick money at, but you feel miserable doing. Yeah.
so yes. So I believe I told you this, but at the community college, I had one of the people tell me, "Well, we know we have you because you don't want to go back into traditional academia,"
Right.
and they treated me that way, and so that's one thing that really resonates with me,
Yeah.
and the other thing that you said just now is, you took the time out to do a course in Galveston,
Yeah.
and you could have done anything else. You could have sat on anything else. And this is a quote, and I use this all the time from Steve Blank. And he said, and Steve Blank's one of my, like entrepreneur heroes, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, but he says, real entrepreneurs, they make their own luck. They show up more than everybody else. When when everybody else says, I don't feel like doing that, it's just too much trouble.
I don't feel like it. I can't do it. Whatever the excuse. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you do that over time, and you create your own luck by doing that. And it's a really, it's such an important concept, and I
Oh yeah.
really would have heard those words 20 years ago instead of 7 or 8 years ago.
No, sure. Yeah.
um, so you started looking into the oyster side of things,
Yeah.
and you decided you met a couple of business partners that had similar interests and complementary skills. And I'm going to ask some questions about that in a minute, but I
Sure.
really want to hear about the business itself that you came up with. And I guess I'm going to put you on the spot and say, give me the pitch.
The
Whether
pitch.
it's the pitch, give me the 2-minute pitch or 3-minute pitch
Sure.
for your business.
It might be 10 seconds. I'm still formulating it, but
Okay.
I guess the fun way I like to view it as essentially I'm putting water filters, I'm putting out filter feeders in the water to clean up that water. And they are local, sustainable foods that I can then sell to the, well, presumably, ideally, to the half shell market towards restaurants. But as of right now, I need a third party distributor in the meantime. The company is still in its infancy. We're still in the permitting process. We don't actually have any oysters in the water yet, but we have larger goals. We want to formulate a co-op that maybe can get its own distributor's license or certification. No license. Terminology. Anyway, still working on that. To
Okay.
bring in the other local fisheries. And it doesn't have to just be oyster farmers, aquaculture, or wild harvest. It could be the shrimp fishermen or insert. We want to build a local cohesive community. And I've had a very great opportunity through work, my actual job, to meet and introduce myself to all of the brand new oyster aquaculture farmers within the state of Texas. For this other water quality parameter project we're trying to do to help improve the fishing conditions and harvesting decisions being made by the farmers. But that's a tangent. Anyway, and I keep trying to try to emphasize to all of them, whether they know that I'm a farmer or not, it depends on the hat that I have on when I'm talking to them. But hey, if everybody stays cool, let's work together, because there is going to be a hurricane coming. And I want everybody to be cool. So when David over there has 13 acres and he only has a handful of crew, he can call us up or call somebody else up. Hey, do you have time in the next day or two to come help me sink my cages before this hurricane? Because I don't have as many, so I can get mine sunk a lot quicker. Or maybe I didn't have time because I live a couple hours north and my boat captain is not there, or just any circumstance. Let's all work together, because this isn't real competition. The market for oysters is so damn big. We're not going to flood it with, a dozen or several dozen farms. We need to just help each other out, because this whole competitive concept of business, that's just moving forward with the future. That's not sustainable at all.
Well, so I want to bring this back. One of the questions that comes out a lot of times is, okay, so, what separates you from everybody else?
Well, I suppose everyone there is trying to grow local, sustainable oysters, but I think our difference is that, in addition to the grander, the larger picture, is that we're also looking to entertain ecosystem services for the estuaries that we're in. We want to do research projects. Hey, do we want to do research on how you handle the cages? How do you clean the cages? Can we base some of our farming techniques off of water quality parameters? Does this in fact increase productivity? Does it reduce risk? Does this actually help you in the long run on like insurance claims? Was there really a storm, or was it really that hot, or was there really that much fresh water? Or are you just saying that because somebody else down the bay had an incident? Like, well, here's some numbers. You want to, not to be ugly, but here's some hardcore evidence. And then we have some redfish aquaculture farms that want us to put some oyster cages out their outflow. And then there's ecosystem services for that. And then there's coastal restoration projects. Wild harvest oysters, they're disappearing and they need oysters, both cases. So, okay, let's take these, relocate them, repurpose them, restore the coast. So there's a lot of moving pieces. Okay. There's a lot of planning and timing. So it's not just growing oysters. In its infancy and main concept, that's it. But there's a lot more that we want to do with it.
So I thought in one of my original conversations with you that we had talked about, and forgive me if I kind of misinterpreted here, but like, setting up a model where you have really high-end oysters that are been graded for taste.
Yeah.
Basically, doing the monitoring of the
water quality.
The water quality and all of the other factors that go into it, and actually modeling. Okay, so when is your optimum time? One of the people that I work with said, he says, well, the way people normally pick the oysters now is you crack one open and you say, oh, it's salty, it tastes good. Let's go with this.
Yeah.
And so being able to bring in that science side of it and monitor and predict, okay, we're going to have an experience that we know going to get the highest quality, best tasting oysters.
Or we could avoid some serious damage to them by either not flipping them and desiccating, or by harvesting them a little bit sooner if they're right at harvest sites. You know what I mean? Like, there's all the different angles that can be played. Or if you're just kind of screwed and you can't do anything, then you have some kind of insurance data right there. Like, as best as you can handle it, considering you're growing a live critter. It's essentially agriculture. Corn or cattle, you're doing your best.
Well, and there's a big data side of that too.
Yeah.
And the more work that I do in big data, the more I sit,
Oh yeah.
you could, with the right monitoring systems built into this production side, you could really change a lot of the industry and become basically the standard for the industry across the whole life cycle.
I've
That's a
been
really neat point there to me.
I've been told that this has a lot of potential, but it's all about getting some grants to make it happen.
I do want to ask you about funding and stuff like that in a couple of minutes,
Yeah.
but I've still got a couple of other questions from this side
Sure.
because I envision this almost like going to a restaurant and saying, oh, I want the top shelf, or seeing that on the
Yeah.
menu and going, oh, look, they're selling top shelf here. Because when I go to a restaurant now and you get oysters, you don't know where they come from. There's not a label associated. Like if you go out and you buy steak and they say, oh, this is Wagyu steak. This there's a high end label associated with a lot of things,
Certainly.
and so I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah.
Did I even say the name of the company?
No, I was going to ask you that next.
Okay. So it's Texas Saltwater Farms. And in terms of your top shell reference, we're going to refer to our oysters as the Matagorda Blues, since it's in Matagorda Bay, Matagorda, Texas,
I
which
see.
is west of Galveston, for whoever doesn't know where Matagorda is.
Yeah, I love the name because I think something like that would catch on really, really good at like the local restaurants, things like that.
And I think it's a fun play off of a little New Orleans vibe. And it's kind of, I don't know, it turns oysters sexy. And I guess that's what sells. But I think the name is cute. And it also plays into some other potential down the line ideas that we might have. Like we have friends who market and put on festivals. And we're like, oh, well, let's bring a little New Orleans to the coast and let's introduce let's let all the oyster fishermen and other fishermen advertise their product. Like it's not like, I don't feel like it's competition. Everybody put it in there. Let's have some fun. We don't have to doesn't have to be trashy, doesn't have to be aggressive. Let's just do some classy something.
Yeah, I think if you don't have on your team already, I think somewhere down the line you have to have a really strong and creative marketing person.
Yes.
Because
So
yeah.
I do. She's my best friend. Her name is Hannah Rhodes. And she did the marketing for our company, as she has her own marketing company, and she's kind of getting that off the ground. And it's really cute. I think it's great. And so we left our name kind of ambiguous, Matagorda, Texas Saltwater Farms, because we have interests in all kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be oysters.
Yeah.
If we do some offshore aquaculture with finfish in 10 years, because that's slowly coming down the line, I don't want to say Texas saltwater oysters and then try to sell a fish.
Absolutely.
So anyway, she said aside from that, she said the oyster logo was played out and she wasn't doing it. So she threw in a seagull. I was like, that's some fun humor.
Yeah, I did see you sent me earlier today a copy of the logo, and I really, you're right about that. Everywhere you come across, it's a watercolor picture of an oyster. I think I actually used an AI generated watercolor picture of an oyster for
I saw that. I didn't have it in time because she just did it. I was like, I would have sent it.
Yes.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So let's see. I'm trying to think. I had a couple of questions. So you have right now 2 other business partners?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Damian Brockman. So I'm CEO. Damian Brockman is CFO. Thank God, because I don't want to do his job. And our other founding partner is Alyssa Dibburn.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yeah. And she's our our local gal, she's from Matagorda. Damien lives up in Austin, and I am in College Station. And we all came together, met in Galveston, and they had known each other for over a year. They've been talking about this for a while, and like, okay, let's talk. So after we spoke for a while, I'm like, all right, you guys have known each other for a while. I trust you. Let's move forward.
Did you meet them at the class in Galveston, or where did you meet them at?
At what?
At the class in Galveston that you went.
Excuse me. Yeah. At the oyster aquaculture workshop that was held by Texas Sea Grant.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And I know we've talked about this in the past, probably a year or two ago, but you're using the slicing pie method for business development, which I'm considering. Mike Moyer's slicing pie. It is a great way to really see what's going on and underlying in the company.
I agree. And I think especially for a company that is bootstrapping, you're putting in sweat equity and very minimal money at the very beginning. It's a very good way to keep track of when it comes time to divvying up who owns, who has so much vote, et cetera, it really does hone, and it's very fair.
That's what I was going to say. It's fair. I've seen way too many people that start off and they say, "Oh, we're gonna start a company," and I'll get a napkin right now and I'll say, "Okay, 33% to me and 33% to you."
And then somebody disappears for 6 months and then comes back and expects, it's like, well, it's not that maybe their portion of the business doesn't start until later when there's cages in the water, for example.
Right.
Minimal for them to do at the beginning, if that was their role to begin with, which you can accommodate for. But if it's just I got 33% because it's like, no. So this model, kudos to that guy. I think it's very fair. And even in I think it's the book, there's a warning at the end. If anyone disagrees with this, they either don't understand it or it's a red flag not to work with them. And I got
yes.
saved our ass once already, so I will not.
I was going to tell you, I've interviewed Mike Moyer here on Startup Grind before.
Yeah.
And we actually talked about that because, and I've had, I've emailed him and said, well, what about in this case scenario? And he'll email back. I mean, he's a really, really nice guy.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best methods out there for divvying up early stage startups.
Oh yeah.
Because again, I've seen the same problem you're talking about, where somebody will come in and say, well, I own this, and it's like, well, I haven't seen you in 4 years. You know?
Right.
Well, don't you remember we wrote it on a napkin 4 years ago?
Right.
Yeah, but you haven't done
any cartoon stick man we drew. That's what I did. Yeah, so we were on the phone with the lawyer in the last few days trying to hash out working agreement before we all signed it. And the lawyer's like, I've never heard of this slicing pie, but she's like, but it solves a lot of very interesting issues that I've come across, and whatever her terminology was, I'm not a lawyer. And she's like, so I'm gonna have to look into that more. But then she wanted to separate bootstrapping separate from LLC operational. She's like, let's just separate these for when you go to apply for like a USDA loan or whatever. They don't need to see all of this because it's just people aren't familiar with it yet. So just let's leave it to the side. Y'all agree on it and move forward with the LLC agreement. So it's like, okay.
On that side, I think Mike Moyer actually has in the back of his book that he says, if you're a lawyer that litigates this type of stuff and you want to know more, please give me a call or send me an email. That he actually, so it might be, just if there's any questions that arise or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I think it's a really important point to bring up there. And like I said, I've talked to you before. I agree. There's a lot more stuff that you're going to be able to do with this when you're talking about setting up monitoring of your wetlands like this for the oysters. there's going to be so many other industries that you have, the ability that data is so important, and you can do so many things with it once you start collecting it and
Oh yeah.
putting it into formats there. So just the data alone is going to be
Right.
worth a fortune if it's done right.
Oh yeah. And then business partners in the future, and how do you handle that, or other contributing parties? The whole thing. It's very, very fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very cool. I love this. And like I said, so how long have you been, like, I know you don't have, oysters harvesting and all, but how long, so let's just say from the day that you were at that meeting in Galveston, class in Galveston, until now, how long did it take you to reach this point? What
It's
was the
been
timeline there?
it's been like a year and a month, a year and 2 months, because I attended that workshop. It was like April or May of last year when I met those guys.
Okay.
Mhm.
So my point is sometimes you'll see that these things, they're like relationships. Sometimes they're really fast and they burn out soon, and then sometimes they're very, very slow building relationships that you have, or entrepreneur experiences. And it sounds like you've got a good ramp that you've been working on, and kind of building the concept over a long period of time,
Oh yeah.
or a
Yeah.
fairly long period of time.
Oh sure. Yeah.
Um, how about now? You mentioned like grants from like USDA and things like that.
Yeah.
Have you thought about any of the other types? Like the first pathway to this is your friends, family, and fools that you have invested in it, and but from there, where are you thinking about next steps?
So I've had a handful of friends, older friends, retired. They have some leeway. And if they said, if I ever needed investors, let them know. I'm hesitant only because I want to see this producing at least 1 year before I do that to anybody that I love and care about. Not saying I don't want to screw anybody over. I don't want to be like, oh, sorry, I suck. Where'd your money go? So, but no. So USDA agricultural grant, I think we technically qualify for very small loan, around 65,000.
Mm-hmm.
If we get not all of our cages, but a portion of them, enough to function for the first year or two, and if we could find used equipment, that's also fine. That'll cover that. And then there's also some smaller nonprofit new business loans out of like Austin, for example, that could you take a few small ones out, and I think we'll get to like $100,000 for the first year operation. Right now, we have a member partner terminology. He comes with himself and a boat, and he wants to help work the field, work the field for a certain amount. Not going in all that now because we're still hashing out the contract. So like for the very first year, somebody has a vessel and he's retired. And he just wants to do it for fun because he wants to be part of a brand new industry. But that doesn't mean he won't be accommodated for the use of his vessel.
Sure.
But he also knows he's putting in some time right now to get paid back later. He understands the sweat equity concept. So
Yeah.
so that's also very good that he just conveniently has the time. But that's also part of being in the industry, knowing people in the area, other people having interests, not wanting to deal with the LLC business bureaucratic stuff, and they just want to go outside and play. So
Well, and a lot of times, they'll say, well, how much do you need to get the business started? And a lot of times, what you hear people say is, you want the minimum amount. Like you don't need to raise millions and millions of dollars if you don't have a use for that. In fact, that's one of the things that slicing pie goes over also. That if somebody were to come in right now and say, okay, I'm gonna as an investor, I'm going to give you $1 million. Well,
Right.
that doesn't translate to equity in the company unless that money's being spent. If it just sits in your bank account because you don't have a need for it, then it
Right.
doesn't truly, and because, and again, it's a great, is if you have somebody that decides to come in and say, oh, I'm just going to ton down money, and now I'm an owner of the company. Well, it doesn't, or now I'm the owner of the company.
Right. You know,
100%.
investors, and I want
Yeah.
I want my vote to weigh this much or whatever.
Right.
Sorry, my dog just came in, and I'm like, get out. I got a little distracted. Sorry.
No problem at all. So it's interesting to kind of think about that as you're moving forward and you're putting your plans together, like exactly how much capital you're going to need and how you're going to burn through it. The burn rate of capital, so these are all things as you start putting together, your business plan, or there's a couple of different ways to do those kind of things, but you're still in such an early stage that you're not, looking at it, needing it yet. But again, I'm thinking about, you mentioned USDA, I'm thinking about like USDA SBIR.
Say it again.
The USDA SBIR, Small Business
Oh,
Innovative
yeah.
Awards.
Excuse me. Yeah, I'd love to entertain that concept. I mean, surely there's something, one of the many things that we want to do could, I think, translate and be relevant for an SBIR grant. Absolutely.
Well, I'm thinking along the lines of if you're really going to build in like predictive algorithms on this,
Yeah.
like monitoring, that you could, set up your hypothesis that you test, these are the parameters that we're going to test, and we're going to have some way of measuring the quality of the oysters. So give me a little crash course in this then on quality of oysters. If like I always, know everybody tells me, oh, you can only go what is it, months with an R in it, or the months that this is the old school thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I suppose, that's safer than sorry approach. I guess people are mostly worried about getting sick by Vibrio. The hotter it gets, and the quicker that virus can multiply. And then if the oysters got it in there, I mean, it's naturally occurring in the water, and if there's too much in there, you are susceptible to getting sick. There's warning labels on everything about consuming raw seafood for this. And actually, there was a case in Galveston Bay earlier this year. I think someone in New Orleans maybe got sick, and it came from Galveston during one of your R months that you can consume. But it was a bottom wild harvest, and it wasn't the floating aquaculture cages that were just right next door. How does that play? Well, they're on top of the water column, whereas the on bottom are on the bottom. That's more likely, I think, where you're supposed to find Vibrio, if I have that correctly. Not a virologist, but I think that's how that works. Now, there's also a lot of parameters put in place to try and reduce that. If there's a spike in the water column due to monthly state testing or what have you, obviously they're going to shut it down for everyone, whether it's on bottom or floating, wild bottom harvest or floating aquaculture. Nobody's harvesting, it gets shut down. But also, there's time sensitive during those hot months when you're not supposed to eat them. You got an hour from the second you pull that cage up to getting them at the correct temperature for the correct month. Because you don't want that virus multiplying like bacteria. So just trying to reduce the risk. Now, in terms of taste, personally, I like oysters smaller. The harvest size here is 2.5 inches, and I like them salty. I don't want to chew on a giant oyster. Like, they're not that good. Okay, like they're good, but They're like, I consider them like the giant boogers of the sea, just a little bit. Okay.
Well, so this is a really interesting question. Like, is there any way to grade the taste of oysters right now? How,
I think I think there's oyster connoisseurs, just like wine connoisseurs. I am not one of either, but
uh-huh. Well, I'm wondering if there's literally like, that, for a lot of other things, like you can grade, tuna.
yeah,
If there's some type of grading matrix out there, and the reason I'm asking you this is because as you're, developing higher and higher quality
hmm
oysters, if you can utilize that grading matrix there, and in order to make sure that your
yeah.
product, and if there's not anything like that, then
Maybe there
I
should be one. For some reason, I feel like there likely is one. I don't know for a fact, but for example, I think people who know oysters, I'm pretty sure they can tell whether it's a wild harvest or an aquaculture. Just by the shell alone, not even getting to the taste.
Mhm.
For whatever
Well,
that's worth. No, the grading, I'm not familiar with.
I'm just, well, if there's not a again, I'm a biochemist, so I always sit there.
Nerd.
Well, I always sit there and say, how are you going to put numbers to this?
Sure.
When people sit there and they'll run a sample somewhere, and they'll say, oh, well, like if you do a test where you get a color change, and they'll say, oh, it goes from blue to green in the color change, so it's positive. And it's like, well, that's great, but you can actually grade that color change over a period of time, and you can measure it with the same numbers. And you can say, okay, 1 through 10, or 1 through whatever. So, if there's not anything out there that's a good grading system right now, that's something that would be interesting to develop, and as part of this exercise, because you're going to probably need that for the direction you're taking, with this idea of, again, you know
Oh,
um,
sure, yeah. And then the other benefit to it, when you're doing these water quality parameters, you take a cage of your oysters, pick the same cage every month, and measure their growth and keep track with the water quality and compare what does it, and then you can also, okay, well, I always flip my cages, or maybe I pull them out, pull the bags out, and pressure wash them, and then put them back in. Or are you allowed to even pressure wash in that base system? There's all these rules and regulations, but there's so many different ways you could approach what is the best. How do you, yeah, anyway. I'm sorry. My cat also got in, and she's now puking up a ball in my bed, and I'm in my bedroom because my family has taken over my house and my office for the week. So it's going great.
that's okay. I'm actually, I know you have to get out a couple minutes early, so I do want to kind of start, kind of asking the final couple of questions here, and
Sure.
finishing up for today. I covered a whole lot. Let me see. Um,
Do you hear her?
I did. Let's see. Like I said, I did want to ask you. Well, I was going to say, I did want to ask you a little bit more. You gave me the background story about how you met the team that you're working with, and you actually led into this. So I was going to ask you questions about how do you put together a strong team? What are the qualities that you look for and all? And it sounds like for you that going through this leadership training has been a really good positive experience there also.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so let me ask you a question. how do you all handle disagreements in the team? I'm sure there must be some.
Oh,
You know,
sure.
you
Yeah.
know, any advice there for somebody? Your last 5 minutes. I like to talk about advice. So, let me start with that question. Advice for working with a team and handling, disagreements. Any advice for people that are struggling with that? A lot of people do.
Yeah, we've had a few bumps in the road. For one, I prefer everyone to be as bluntly honest as possible without being a jerk. To say everything. We're not babies. No name calling, minimal cursing unless it's great, but don't be insulting. And then just kind of work through it, rationalize it step by step, weigh and measure. And if somebody's just being absolute, if it's just, oh, somebody's scared, that's why they don't want to do it, which is something we have come up with. We have one individual that is, I think, just blatantly terrified of all of the hypothetical outcomes of just being a business owner. And we just have to keep stepping through, like, okay, that could happen, or we could actually really get ahead of the curve and push forward. And we just actually sampled our second site this last weekend, and it was a little bit of encouragement, but we're watching how long this first permit takes. No. By the time we get cages in the water, ideally by the end of this year, we'll still be in the beginning middle stages of the second site. It's like, let's keep it going. So
Yeah,
I like blunt honesty, have it all out, and everybody be polite to each other, but also, tell the truth. That's not going to work because this.
yeah. It's good to have people on the team that in some ways it's really good to have people that say, wait a second, I I've got questions here. You run into so many entrepreneurs that'll sit there and tell you, oh, well, this is the best idea ever,
Right.
and it's almost like they're drinking their own Kool-Aid on this.
Right.
And
And I don't mind devil's advocate at all, just to
that's
make sure the decision is the right one, but also holding the business back because of not real issues that's not going to fly either. So we've gotten through it.
yeah. So I guess as an entrepreneur, um, any like highlight moments so far? I know you're early into it, but what was something so far that you said, okay, I can do this, or entrepreneurship is such a manic depressive journey. It's so nasty, the ups and downs. So what's the ups you've had?
Okay, well, you broke up a lot, but I think I know what you're asking me. I think the moment that I was like, okay, this is going to work was after I hit the submit button on the first lease application. And we had gone through so much to get to that point. And I think it was like right before Christmas or my birthday, which is right there. It was in that like holiday, everybody's about to disappear and let's get this done. And then we've had no problems. So we did the application incredibly well. So I guess we're all a little anal retentive, but I think it also helped that we all have an educational background so we could read through and decode the lingo of the state. But yeah, it was hitting the submit button. And then after that, it's been like, all right, let's take a few minutes and then on to the next one. Let's keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
That was the
Yes.
high. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give you the last question then of the day.
Okay.
So, any advice or what would you tell somebody thinking about being an entrepreneur or just starting that journey? And what would you tell them? Any advice that you would have for them? Or,
If they see the practicality of whatever it is that they're trying to do, just try it. I mean, how do you think the company that you work for got to the point to where it is to hire you and put you on salary or hourly or whatever it is? Even that bar you might be working at, slinging beers, hoping for those good tips that Saturday night. Like they had to take the risk and open the place. Why don't you think you can? And if you're terrified, hey, business partners help make this thing go. And I got to say, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this is my company. I did all of this. No way. I got a CFO for a reason because I don't want to do that. And he loves it. Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And I talk to the fisherman and he doesn't want to. So it's perfect. I go out in the field. He could if he wants. Did you hear? See, she's hawking it up again.
I did. I did hear that.
Anyway, yeah,
Well,
I say give it a shot and don't be afraid to, well, split the pie with people, you know?
yeah. Well, Sarah, I know that you got to run to another meeting right now, and so I just wanted to, thank you for your time today and giving
Thank
us
you.
insight of your early stage and your ideas. And we really do look forward to hearing, back, as your company grows and watching this whole thing kind of evolve. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a great story.
Oh, I'm excited for it. Maybe I'll just make something up for the next time, really throw you for a curveball.
Okay.
Anyway, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, really.
All right. Well, again, thanks everybody for coming today. And like I said, I'll be putting this up on the Startup Grind website probably in the next couple of days. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.